had a fascinating day today at yoga practice, and the subject came up of sex. And talking about it with the other students and the teacher, I realized a couple of things. One is that people don't talk about sex. And two, there is so much, I think because people don't talk about sex, there's so much like misinformation, or just not even misinformation, but I don't think a lot of people really know what they like, what they don't like, how to do it, if they're doing it well, blah, 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 blah. And then the other thing is that everyone's definition of sex is basically just penetration. And having these conversations today, I realized, wow, like even in my life, coming from the US, I feel like my friends and I will have conversations around sex for the most part, but they're not very in depth, and they're usually only centered around like the physical act of sex with a partner. And when we defined sex today, not necessarily, we didn't define it like scientifically or anything like that, but it was more just like getting other people's input about, what is sex. And I actually said a few things like, it's more intimacy as well as the act of sex, like making a cup of coffee for someone and holding their hand and gazing into each other's eyes. Like, in a way, that intimacy, I think, it's just my opinion, is a form of sex. And whether it leads to sex or not, doesn't matter. It's like, it's pleasurable. It brings euphoria, it brings joy and giddiness and happiness. Like, so isn't that kind of what sex is? Like, if you're looking at it as more of a broad term. So that was interesting to listen to other people's kind of, when someone says the word sex, like, what do you think? And it's interesting to me because that means that most of us, I think, have had no real education or conversations around sex. Like, yes, we've had the 7th grade, or I don't even remember, was it 5th grade? Like biology, where the teacher comes in and they're all tense and like don't want to talk about this, but they have to. And it's, talking about basically just genitalia and kind of how it works, but not really. And then, like, as a young girl, I remember asking my mother about it. And I'm pretty sure her response was, like, what'd she say? Just don't do it till you're married. So it wasn't even a conversation like about it or like how it works or what happens. It was more just don't do it till you're married. So my growing up around the word sex has never been like it's always almost seemed a bit taboo in a lot of ways, even though most human beings and animals and everything in the world has sex. So having these conversations today was blowing my mind because there's really not a lot of conversations around sex. There's not a lot of I know there's podcasts out there. I know there's books written, and also with the when people in like the yoga community talk about sex, you're kind of talking about tantra, and everyone that like doesn't know tantra, and I'm just like, you know, in the first 4 chapters of understanding, the practice of tantra, and everyone jumps to the, oh, that's like, that's all about sex. Tantra is all about sex. And it's like, actually, no. It's more about just the pleasure of living and I feel even like pleasure sometimes is like a, not a bad word, but when you say pleasure, it's like people think you're talking about sex, and it's like, no, like you can find pleasure in eating food or in like an activity you like. I love scuba diving. I find so much pleasure in scuba diving, and there's just so many kind of words and miscommunications and misinformation on the subject of like tantra and on the subject of sex even, that I really had to sit there today and think about all those times in my life that I was misled, or just things weren't quite described properly, or like, saying the word pleasure and people kind of, oh, she's talking about sex, oh my god, like everybody run the other way because we don't talk about sex. So I'm just really fascinated by this whole subject now, and really interested in hearing from more people kind of like their definition of sex, because like I said, mine is more about the intimacy of and it wasn't always that way. My definition definitely for many years has always just been about the act of having sex, and not actually just the pleasure of being a human and delighting in all the things we are able to delight in this beautiful place called Earth. So yeah, I feel like there's so much to say on this topic, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna go there. I just thought I would say a few things about it tonight, just because I was so blown away by people's responses today. And yeah, that's my story. Thanks for being here.